So the other day, I'm with my boys hanging out at the gym in Lethbridge, Alberta, of all places. And I kind of have this crisis moment, okay? So I'm in the gym, boys are playing ball with their buddies, I walk in and I see some of my kids' friends, right? And they come up and say, hi, good guys, I love them, Aiden and Eric. So we're hanging out with them, and then Eric goes out and he starts playing badminton with my son Peyton, which is pretty cool. So I'm kind of on the sideline watching this, and then all of a sudden I'm like, hey, I think maybe I'd like to get in on this action. I mean, who doesn't want a little badminton action, right? Because that's super fun. Now, the truth be known, I was also thinking to myself, this would be a great opportunity for me to show the boys, what kind of prowess I have on the badminton court. You know what I'm saying? Because when I went to high school, I actually, really loved badminton. I played it all the time. I had a chance to go to, provincials and play in that space. I mean, I was serious about badminton, right? So I go up and I'm like, hey, dude, why didn't you let me have a shot at the badminton racket? So I grab the racket from my son and I go on the court, so excited about showing everyone how amazing I am. And all of a sudden I realize oh, I'm super older than I ever was when I played badminton in high school. And things have changed for me. I remember the first time they hit the bird at me, I go to hit it, completely miss. Don't even come close. Seriously embarrassing moment for me. I begin to realize that I can't see the bird as much as I used to be able to see it. I can't move as quick as I used to be able to move. And I can't do it nearly as long as I used to be able to do it. And I remember just kind of coming into this space where I'm feeling a little bit ashamed, feeling maybe I don't quite belong, feeling I'd really like to get off the badminton court right now and maybe never return again. You know, when I thought about it afterwards, I remember just kind of thinking to myself, hey, I've experienced this before. I've experienced this moment of crisis before. You know, when I grew up, sports weren't just something that I did. They were actually a part of who I was. They played this really important part in kind of me expressing my identity. And it did some crazy stuff for me. I remember, never wearing jeans. I always wore sweats because I wanted to be prepared. If ever a game broke out, I would be the one that would join in the game. I remember in school, I played on every single sports team I could possibly play on because I wanted to be known as the athlete in the school. This was something I did, but it was so much more than just something I did. I did crazy stuff. I would carry a Sports Illustrated around. Why? Just so that people could have this sense that in some way I was really serious about my athletics. When I made teams, I always wanted to wear the gear so that people could see the gear on me and realize I was serious about the sports. And I mean, this was just really core to who I was. And with it came all sorts of weird emotional ups and downs, right? If I made a team, I felt really good about myself because I felt who I was really living that out. I got excited about it. But man, if I didn't make a team, it was crushing for me. Now, I remember one year I made a provincial baseball team, which was really amazing in and of itself. But then once I got on the team, I realized that, man, I wasn't even going to get to play. And people were showing up to watch me play, but I was sitting on the bench. And I remember just feeling so embarrassed about the moment because it wasn't just that I didn't get to play. It was that I almost didn't get a chance to be. It was core to who I was. You know, I think for many of us, we are involved in activities, experiences, relationships that can be really good things, but they're actually more than that. They become defining things for us. Okay, here's what I want you to do. I want you to circle up or break into groups with the people around you, and I want you to just talk a little bit about what are the experiences or activities or communities you're a part of that are really defining for you. They play a significant role in your identity. Go ahead and take some minutes and talk about that. Hey, we live in a culture that tells us right now that essentially when it comes to your identity, you can be whoever you want to be. You can choose whatever activity you want to define you. You can choose whatever group you want to be a part of. You can choose, you can be whoever you want to be. That your sense of self or identity primarily comes by how you feel about yourself. You should do whatever makes you feel good or be happy. This is core to the cultural kind of narrative that we live in. But here's the problem. When we begin to live under this reality or idea that we can be whoever we want to be, that idea of creating our identity can actually become crushing for us. I mean, there's a couple of things I think about. Number one, how do I actually know who I want to be? You know what I mean? Like I have a feeling right now, it feels kind of good right now, but is this really who I want to be? And is it going to be more than just who I want to be right now? What about down the road from now? What happens if the person I want to be now, I find out is not actually the person I want to be later on? How do I understand that? How do I figure that out, who I want to be long term? What if I decide to pursue an identity and I can't actually achieve it? Do you know what I mean? Like, what do I do then where I invest in this and this becomes a part of me, but all of a sudden there's a fail? I don't just lose like an activity, I actually lose myself in that moment. Or what happens if others, don't affirm who I am? How do I respond then? Like, this is supposed to be who I am, how I'm presenting myself in this space. This is the identity I've chosen, but you don't actually appreciate it. What do I do in that moment? How do I handle that kind of pressure, that kind of rejection, that kind of disappointment? I think sometimes this pressure to actually define ourselves can be really difficult, man. It can leave us anxious. It can leave us really fragile. And I think in many ways, it can sometimes leave us paralyzed. For some of us, the fear of failure, of not being able to create our own identity, man, it can be completely overwhelming. But you see, this is what is really beautiful about being a follower of Jesus, right? Like, as followers of Jesus, we understand that when God created us, He didn't design us to create our own identity. He designed us to actually discover the identity that He's given us. Okay, so there's this really cool passage in Psalm 139, verse 13 to 16. And the author of Psalm 139 is talking all about this idea that we have a God who is seriously invested in designing who we are, right? Listen to what the passage says. It says, "For you formed my inward parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed substance. In your book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet there was none of them." Okay, there's a few things that super stand out to me from the passage, right? Here's the first thing. The number one thing is this reality that we have a God who's created us, you guys. I mean, listen to the words in the passage, right? He says things like, "You formed my inward parts. You've knitted me together." He says that I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. He goes on in verse 15 and says, "When I was being made in secret." In verse 16, he says, "Your eyes saw my unformed substance." You guys, do you understand that we have this God who is intricately created and designed us? I mean, this takes some serious attention, right? It's not just an accident that came out of nowhere. It's like God actually going to work and designing something. So when I finished college, I went to Canmore as a youth pastor, which was pretty awesome, right in the middle of the mountains, right? Really loved it. And I wanted to get involved in snow sports. So I tried both snowboarding and skiing, which are two really different experiences. Here's the best way I can kind of differentiate between the two experiences. Snowboarding is something that's crazy hard to do when you first get started, right? It beats you up. Any of you who've tried to snowboard, you know that day one of snowboarding creates pain in parts of your body that you didn't even know you had. I remember after the first day of snowboarding, trying to get out of my bed and barely being able to get up because my core hurt, my arms hurt, my everything hurts. But what's really interesting about snowboarding is it's super hard on day one, but by day 3, if you stay with it, it's almost like you feel like an expert. You know what I mean? I just found by day 3, there really wasn't a part of the hill that I couldn't ride. Now, I couldn't twist and go invert and all that kind of stuff, but I could really ride. I could just do it. And it didn't seem like it took a lot. The beginning was hard, but it came pretty quick. Now, skiing is different. Skiing is a really intricate skill. I mean, when you start with skiing, you can kind of manage quite a bit of the hill, but if you really want to become proficient, if you really want to get good at it, you got to worry about the details. I remember when I went to a friend of mine and I asked him if he would teach me how to ski, and I remember he just worked on details, how to roll over your ankles, how to keep your upper body straight, and how to change the angles into the snow so that your edges could really carve, you could really move through the mountain and control it. And I remember just thinking man, this takes work, this takes concentration, this takes focus. This is a skill that's being created here. It doesn't just come to you, you have to really focus in. Hey, when God created us, It wasn't just that he went, bam, there's human beings, good, done, walk away, finished, and just kind of throw it out there and whatever comes, comes. You know what I mean? There's a focus to what he does. There's this intimate investment, this concern about the details when he speaks about creating who we are. You guys, I think this is so amazing to me when I think about this idea that we just aren't accidents. Do you know what I mean? And as human beings, there is like a value to us that we've been given because of the kind of time and investment that God has put into designing us. And it's just powerful. I remember sitting down with one of my students in my first church that I was a youth pastor at, and we were just talking about this idea that we've been created by God, right? And I remember he was struggling with this concept that there'd actually been a designer that had put him together. And I remember we were sitting at A&W and we're eating French fries, and I just looked at him. I finally said, hey, dude, you know this French fry? He goes, yeah. I go, what if I told you that you were like no more valuable than this French fry, or like a potato, or maybe a rock? And he's just kind of like, oh, come on, dude. Like, he knows that, right? Like, you and I, we both know that there's this value in us that's different than just like inanimate objects that are around us. But I said to him, hey, listen, if you believe that we just kind of happened and came from nothing with like no really work to it, I said, then the truth of the matter is our conclusion would have to be our value is essentially kind of like the same, right? But I said what the Bible tells us is that we have this value because we have a God who is invested in our creation and our design, and it's on purpose, and we have been made in his image, and each one of us individually has had the attention of the Creator in our design. You guys, how amazing is that? Here's the first thing you need to know, right? Is that like you've been created by God. The second thing that you need to know is you've been like uniquely created by God. Part of your identity is that like you have this unique presence and this way of being, which is actually mind-blowing. So listen to what David says here. He says, you formed my inward parts. In verse 15, he says, my frame was not hidden from you. In 16, he says, you saw my unformed substance. Okay, so what's this like inward parts that we're talking about? When he talks about this inward parts, he's saying that we have this unique personality, this inner self, this loves and these interests. He's like, hey, each and every one of us has been created so uniquely. You know, I remember when my boys were small, and I was just blown away by how different they were. Like, we had this moment, right? When my oldest son, Peyton, he was kind of struggling with homework a little bit, so we were really pressing in on him. We'd pick him up from school, and we'd just say, hey, PK, do you got all your homework? You're going to be able to get it done tonight? And he'd be like, yeah, didn't really love it, didn't like the idea. And I remember one day we brought him home, and it's like getting late, 8:30, past their bedtime, right? And all of a sudden, I hear Peyton on the phone talking to his buddy, and they're talking about a test they have the next day. And Peyton's kind of like, yeah, I'm not really prepared for it. So when Peyton gets off the phone, I'm like, hey, son, you have a test tomorrow? He's like, yeah. I'm like, dude, you need to do some studying. He's like, well, Dad, I didn't bring my books home. And I'm like, hey, we talked about this at school. I asked you if you had any homework. He goes, Dad, it's not a homework. It's like a test. And I'm like, hey, from now on, tests are homework. Let's get serious about this. So I'm upset because he's not leaning in, doing the work he needs to do. In the meantime, his younger brother, Cole, starts pulling all of his books out of his bag. And he's like little, like grade 6, right? He's pulling all these books out. He's getting his homework out. I'm like, hey, what are you doing? Like, seriously, Cole, what are you doing? He goes, well, Dad, I've got homework to do. I'm like, you do not have homework to do. He's like, no, Dad, I really have homework to do. I'm like, kid, put your books away. You're not doing homework. You need to go to bed. I said, every time you tell me you have homework, you don't actually have homework. It's not due for like 2 or 3 weeks, but you're just working on it way too much. Enough with the homework. And I remember finally pulling back and just going, I'm losing my mind. Like, both of these children have the same parents. Both of them have been brought up in the same space, and they are both so incredibly different. Hey, this is amazing about God, right? He's designed each of us so incredibly uniquely. Different interests, different values, different ideas. Like, we're just wired so different. We can be born from the same family. We can be born in the same culture. We can be born in the same environment, but we can be so different. Some of us are autistic, emotional. Some of us are logical, task-oriented. We're so different, you guys. You've been wired and designed uniquely by our Father. And this is mind-blowing to me. When you start to think about the idea that there's literally like billions of us, you know what I mean? Like on this planet, billions. And each one has this like unique print on themselves. When David realizes this, listen to what he says. He says, I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it full well. He's going, this is so amazing, God, that you would do this. I remember when we bought my little nephew a Buzz Lightyear gift. You know, that doll Buzz Lightyear, right? And we bought him like this really big one. It was almost the same size as him because he was pretty small. And I remember when he opens up his gift for Buzz Lightyear, he just like loses his mind because he's been dreaming about this moment forever. He's just starts going, buh, buh. He can't even say it. So he's running around the room trying to hold this huge Buzz Lightyear. He's like, buh, buh, buh. And then he presses a button. It's like to infinity and beyond. And it's just like blowing his mind how amazing this is that he's actually with Buzz Lightyear. Hey, you guys, when we really begin to understand how God's wired and designed us, like who we are, it should blow our minds, right? We should stand back and we should go, this is amazing. And not so much because we're amazing, although we are, honestly. Like human beings are amazing. The potential for incredible good, designed so uniquely. It's amazing. But what should really blow our minds is how there could be a God that wired us this way. That's amazing. It's not so much that we are amazing. It's mind-blowing how amazing He is. That there's a God who's not just simply up in space, kind of toss things out and just letting it happen, but He has been like so invested in designing and wiring who we are and putting us together and placing us in the moments we are, you guys. This is amazing. We have an amazing God, a powerful God who is wired, designed, and created uniquely for unique purposes. And David says, like, I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Our minds are blown by this reality. Okay, here's what I want you to do. I want you to, again, circle up, talk in your groups just real quickly. What is one way, like personality, interest, or experience, that God has uniquely designed you, right? It's kind of like the stamp of amazement that He's placed upon you. Go ahead and take a few minutes and just talk about that. So I remember after I finished high school and went to college, I had like an identity crisis, right? So here's the deal. I'm in this new environment. I'm feeling pretty insecure. And so what do I turn to like create security in my life? I turn to sports. So I'm trying for the hockey team, which was a big deal for me. And I remember thinking, if I can just make this team, people can see me. They'll think I'm great. I'm going to feel great. It's going to be awesome. And I remember the team. I made the team, which was pretty cool. And then we went and had a tournament in Alberta, did really well. That was awesome. Came back. We were going to have our first like home series in front of our home crowd. And I remember just thinking so much, man, everyone's going to see me. This is going to be amazing. They're going to know, who I am. I'm Sid, the hockey player. Oh, yeah. And then the first practice we have before like that weekend series, I'm cutting up the ice in a drill, and one of the players on my team, he sticks his leg out on me and pops my knee, tears it up. I remember in the moment just realizing, this is it. Like, this is over for me. And in many ways, like, it created a crisis, right? Like, it created like a real crisis for me. I mean, here was the deal. For me, my identity was based in the hockey, so I had to make the team, did that great. But not only did I have to make the team, I had to perform. And when that player, like, he tripped me up, hockey was done. And because it was such a core sense of myself, in a way, it was almost as if I was done too, right? Like, it was almost as if like it was over for me. I mean, this is what happens, you guys, when you feel this pressure to create your own identity. You build something and you design it, but it's fragile, and if it's gone, then you're gone too. And I realized when I stepped back from that moment in college that God was teaching me a really important lesson. He was helping me understand this lesson that even today I still need to be reminded that my identity is not like based on my accomplishments or the positions I achieve. It's not based on like the friends that I can gather online or the likes I get for the selfie that I posted, right? Like, in fact, my identity has very little to do with me. My friends, it has everything to do with Him. Like, He's the one who has created and designed us. He has uniquely made us. He has put us together. He accepts us. He calls us. What God says about you matters like infinitely more than what anyone else says, including yourself, by the way, right? It doesn't even matter what you say about yourself compared to what God says about you. He's your creator, and he is intimately invested in your life. And when you begin to realize this, when we begin to really realize this, we embrace the idea that we've been created by God, it really changes us. A couple of ways. First of all, it makes us people who are resilient, right? Even though we might fail at different activities, we're good because we're not our activities. It's not who we are. It's something we get to do. It's awesome. We're thankful for it, but it actually doesn't define who we are. When we understand that our identity comes from God, we become really stable people. Even though emotions rise and fall, we're still good because our emotions don't dictate truth for us. Jesus dictates what's true about us. And then we become people who are strong, right? Though other people might have like various agendas for our lives, we entrust ourselves to the one who only has one good agenda for our life. It's God's agenda to make us more human, the people he originally designed us to be, to make us more like Jesus. That's his agenda. In every circumstance, that's what he's trying to do. And when we begin to understand this, you guys, we just become like these resilient people that God uses to bring him glory, help people see how amazing he is, and bring good to other people. But it's rooted on the identity, right? On our identity. It's rooted in this reality. You belong to Jesus. You don't have to create your identity. You simply have to discover it.